Welcome back to build season. In the last video, you saw us try to boost this truck for dirt cheap. We didn't exactly get it right. In this video, we're gonna go through the truck, we're gonna try to determine what's wrong. In the last video, it was smoking and it barely ran. We ended up pushing it back into the shop here. To start, I want to relieve all of the people out there who are so worried about this engine being blown up, myself included. The Fundra does still run. You can see right now it's not even smoking. All right, so the truck does still start up and run, and it doesn't even really smoke that bad at idle. So the first thing I wanted to determine, I wanted to prove if this was actually working, was to monitor the fuel pressure. I wasn't totally convinced that my boost reference mechanical pump was actually doing just that. I installed this mechanical wizardry right here, which basically I tapped into the fuel line right down here, and I plumbed in one of the cheapy fuel pressure gauges that actually runs up the back of the firewall and is custom mounted right here on the windshield. So here inside the truck, right when we start it up, see the fuel pressure is bouncing around just a little bit, but it's hovering right around about 7 psi. So now, as we accelerate, disregard the squealing belts. See that? Other than the squealing belts, if you watch the fuel pressure, as soon as I start to spool the turbo, it adds pressure to the pump. There was almost 10 pounds of fuel pressure right there, so we added about 3 pounds to the pump. So the boost reference mechanical fuel pump is actually working. Okay, so our fuel system is behaving the way that it should. That aftermarket pump is 80 gallons per hour, and we are getting 1 pound of boost, or 1 pound of pressure increase with each pound of boost. I'm also battling power steering. I think this thing has leaked out pretty much all the fluid, so we're at like, I don't know, maybe a quarter of the assist. I have to get back home and put some more in before we drive it too much more. Okay, so right now it's actually running clean. I'm not really hitting any boost. I'm just kind of coming up on 100 kPa, watching AFR, and just trying to pay attention to how the truck is running. It does seem like it's still misfiring. It's not backfiring, but it's missing. And no smoke yet. Okay, pulling up to a stop sign right now. Let's see if we get a cloud of smoke out the exhaust when we take off. Okay, so it's missing a little bit, which I probably think is still from fuel, but it's not smoking yet. Look at this. Our air fuel ratio gauge has left the chat. I'll have to pull that sensor and see what's up. I wonder if the thing is cooked. All right, here we are. We got back home. It's been, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes or so. 5 to 10 minutes. And here we are again. Smoking. It did not smoke like this when it started up. So we know our fuel pump is making pressure and keeping up, rising with boost. There's our front float bowl. Some of you probably say that's a little bit high, but I think that works for me. I'm gonna leave it right where it is. So we've got fuel in both bowls, albeit maybe a little bit high. And the thing is smoking now, but it wasn't when we first fired it up. I'm gonna pull the plugs and see what I can find. All right, here's what I found. This is driver's side and passenger side, front to back. So this one here, this is the number 5 plug right here. Very oily, all the way up the threads and everything. Definitely on the electrode and stuff. This one's definitely burning oil. This is the next one. I noticed this one has a broken porcelain. That could have been part of the reason why it wasn't firing, but when it was firing, you can look at the ground strap there, and that actually looks like this cylinder was running decent. So actually, all of the plugs here, they all look fairly good, except for this one in cylinder number 5. The rest of these have decent tan colored ground strap on them. Now I mean, they're old and they have a little oil from above, which I believe is from the valve cover leaking. Otherwise, the ground straps on all of these actually look pretty good to me for an old plug. Next thing I want to do is compression test that hole and just see if we have any compression at all. Okay, so here's the compression test, number 5 cylinder. All the plugs are out. I'm gonna put my foot to the floor. The gas line or fuel line is removed from the carb and just shooting into a bottle. Okay, let's see. Looks like 151-ish PSI. All right, here are the results. On number 5, we had 150 PSI, you guys saw that. Then I went through the rest of the engine, and each cylinder was between 120 and 130 PSI. So I'm thinking that this 120 to 130 PSI is normal, and our number 5 cylinder is actually high. What that tells me, at least so far, is that the head gasket is good, the valves are sealing good, and at least at this point, the piston rings seem fine. All right, I've got the world's cheapest borescope here. There's a good picture. It's probably really tough to see on camera because of the glare from the light, but if you look right there, that is an enormous puddle of oil. You can see the black right there. That's a good picture. It's actually shiny. We have a huge puddle of oil inside cylinder number 5. So our compression is good on all cylinders. It's not as high as I'm used to, but I hear these FEs, at least the 360s, have like an absolute turdly low compression ratio. We actually have the highest compression on the number 5 cylinder, which is the one with the oiliest plug. I think that's because the oil that's dripping into that cylinder is making it seem like the rings are sealing tighter. That's my guess. I did shove my inspection camera down all of the other cylinders, and I didn't see anything alarming other than every cylinder had a smidgen of oil, like, you know, liquid oil on top of the piston. Not a puddle, just a little bit of remnants of oil there. So it seems to me like every cylinder is leaking just a little bit of oil, but number 5 is especially bad. So I've been doing a little bit of reading, and things that can cause massive oil burning in an FE are probably the most common, or at least what I've seen on forums the most, is the intake manifold gasket. Second to that would be valve stem seals. I do remember Kevin saying that he was suspect of these valve seals. They were put in there a long time ago. I don't believe those guys changed them when they had this thing apart. Man, these things are glued on here so hard. All the bolts are out, and yeah, they're not even budging. Come off there. I don't want to pry on them too hard and create more bends in the valve cover, because then it'll just leak more when it's back together. But these are on here. Can't even get a good place to pry at it. Oh, there we go. We had something happen there. Ooh. Do I have to take more stuff off? I thought it was just the bolts. 5 bolts. Hold these on. I must be missing something. Hey Kevin, I have a pry bar to match your little baby hammer. The Bibby hammer. Sure, that's what we're gonna call it. The Bibby hammer. T-shirt idea. Let's see if I can't get this to pop. Oh yeah, there we go. I'm gonna guess I'm gonna need valve cover gaskets after this. Holy macaroni, man. Those things were on there super, super tight. Okay, let's have a closer look, shall we? So under the valve cover, I don't really see anything immediate that gives me pause. I do see just a little bit of oil pooling right ahead of that drain back hole right there. I also see oil on top of the valve springs, but that seems to be pretty consistent all the way down. I do hear that if these drain back holes on the FE cylinder heads get clogged with anything, they can cause oil to pool up inside the valve cover and then inevitably get sucked down into the cylinder. I think maybe I'll put the plugs back in and get it running with the valve cover off and just see how much oil is being pumped up here. The other thing I wanted to check, sometimes if the oil seal in a turbo like this is out, it'll push oil past the turbine shaft, and you'll see that sometimes in the compressor or the outlet of the compressor here. So I'm gonna pull this off and we'll check down in here, check down in there. And it's hard to see on camera, but I'm not seeing any remnants of oil or anything inside the intake tube. So at this particular point, I'm going to say that it's probably not the turbo's oil seal. I know it could also be out on the other side, but with that giant puddle of oil in cylinder number 5, I think that's our culprit. I think I'll put plugs back in it, fire it up, let it run for a while, and see just how much oil is going up into the top end. Look at all the oil. Look at it clinging out of there. Holy crap. Okay, so that obviously made a huge mess. But holy crap, man. The oil is coming out of the rocker arms like crazy. Like, doesn't surprise me that this thing is probably getting overfull of oil. If the oil pools up in the valve cover above the intake valve seal, when the intake valve opens, the engine's under vacuum, it's going to suck oil past the seal into the compression chamber and burn it. So that could be potential of what's happening here. It would explain why the thing doesn't burn oil right away. The cylinder head has to fill up with oil first. The amount of oil that's in cylinder number 5, to me, it seems more like intake gasket, but I have valve seals. I have a tool coming. I'm going to do valve seals on this thing with the heads on, put it back together and test it. If that doesn't fix it, then we have to take the intake manifold off. Oh, hey, thanks for coming in today. I'm glad you're back. Oh yeah, thank you so much for noticing. That's right, yes. This is my shirt that was given to me by Steve over at This Week with Cars. These aren't quite available yet. I think maybe you can get them online now, but I'm the first one that was given one. Go check out Steve's channel, This Week with Cars. I'm sure you guys have seen it if you've watched Junkyard Digs. His shop is amazing and he's a super cool guy. He designs all of his own shirts and his own stickers. I have a million of them I'm going to put on the Datsun. I ordered a valve spring compressor tool to change the valve seals on the Fundred with the heads on, and I still don't have it yet. In the meantime, there's a couple of things with the carburetor I want to address. Obviously, I'm sure everybody's dying to know if something is wrong in here, if we popped a diaphragm somewhere. So I want to take it apart and just check a couple of things like that. Just in case anybody's curious, here are the factory specs on a Proform 650 race carburetor. That'll give you the baseline of the jets and air bleeds and the power valve and the needle and seat that's in there. So one thing I want to check is the power valve and the diaphragm. I want to make sure nothing is blown out. This thing was acting kind of strange, as you guys saw. I've talked with Kevin a little bit, and he's seeming to think that maybe the power valve diaphragm is blown out because we had to remove that check ball. I'm going to blow the bowl off here and just take a look. So here you can see these are the nitrophile, I guess is what they're actually called. Nitrophile floats. These are the solid floats, so they won't compress under boost. Okay, all of this looks in order to me. I'm going to dig in, take this power valve out. Just looking this over to see if there's anything wrong with the diaphragm inside here. So far it seems okay, but I do think we are going to actually change out the power valve to a lower vacuum one. This one is a 4.5, as the card says. It's probably going to be really hard to see that on camera, but there's a 4 and a 5 stamped into the brass ring right in here. So that signifies that this thing will open at 4.5 inches of mercury or higher, or less, I should say, less vacuum than that. So 4.5 and up to 0, right? This thing will be wide open, flowing fuel. So one way to check these power valves is to get a little intimate with it. and I'm not getting any leakage of air or anything past the diaphragm, so power valve is fine. Albeit it's a 4.5. I think we're gonna up this thing to like an 6.5 at least, but maybe an 8, 8.5. That will hopefully get the power valve to open a little bit earlier so that we'll transition to some extra enrichment sooner as we approach 100 kPa. Should help with that lean out as we transition to the secondaries. It's the next day. I'm going to take the valve springs off and try to do the valve seals on the Ford today. I have concocted my own sort of tool setup that I think is going to work. I saw this on a forum. This is an on-head valve spring compressor of a type that will work with the Ford rocker shaft assembly. This hook right here will hook over a piece of pipe right here that is drilled to bolt in place of the rocker shaft. This will hook onto the pipe, and then these arms right here will sit right on the spring and then push them down. Rocker assembly right here. Just set this guy on the bench. All right, Dalton, if you're watching, this is something I like to call 3 out of 4 ain't bad. 2 out of 3 ain't bad either, right? Kevin, you should know what that means by now. Anyway, there's my support rod down there. I'll kind of show you guys how this hooks up. Okay, so here is the bar that I bolted down to the rocker shaft holes. Right down in there, you can see the hooks that hook onto the back of that bar. And then here is the actual valve spring compressor on the valve spring. So it's kind of difficult to do one-handed, but if you look down in there, now I can just push down the valve. The idea with that tool, I'm just going to apply air pressure to the cylinder so I can keep the valves up. Then I can push the valve spring down, magnet the keepers out of there, and then I can pull the valve spring off the top, replace the valve seal, and put it all back in. It should be pretty straightforward. I've done this a bunch on LS engines, small block Chevys. It works just fine. So this combination of tool works pretty good. I will link this tool in the description below, and the other piece is just a piece of 3/4 inch, I believe it's black gas pipe, and I just drilled 4 holes in it the same distance apart as the rocker shafts. One of them was off, but 3 out of 4 ain't bad. In order to pressurize the cylinder, I'm actually going to use my leak down tester. This is because it has a regulator, so I can slowly turn the pressure up. I don't need very much pressure to hold those valves up, but I don't need to be shoving 120 psi in it. The end of my compression, or my leak down tester, does not have an adapter that fits the thread on these spark plugs. So I made this awful thing. This is an old spark plug. I smashed the porcelain out of the center of it and welded an air chuck to it. It works, but I do need the regulator so that I can bleed the pressure off. You see I have my leak down tester hooked up to my little adapter. We start to bring the pressure up. Should start to hear air going in that cylinder. Okay. So here you can hear the leak right there. That modified spark plug deal does not actually seal perfectly. That's okay. We have about 10 pounds of pressure going in. I'm gonna up this to like 30 or 40 pounds here. You probably hear it hissing out of there. Okay, seriously, just to get this little brace off for the AC pump, I had to take this out of the exhaust manifold. This is a 13 millimeter 12-point head on there on like a 7/16 bolt. What the heck, Ford? What the hell is this? Now, you guys in the comments tell me, is this factory stuff or is this just like weird Ford stuff? On my father-in-law's Ford Ranger, he used to have, there was like a 5-sided bolt that held the ABS sensor in. What the hell is that? Who uses 5-sided bolts? Everything is sick. Maybe 12. What the hell? I'm gonna pump up the cylinder here. I'm gonna hook up my valve spring compressor and grab a magnet and then pop that valve spring out for what I believe the intake valve, I think, is this very front one. So we're gonna try that first and see what the valve seal's like. Without further ado, we're gonna try 30 psi and just see if it can hold. See if that's enough to hold the valve spring. All right, we're over the valve and push down. The keepers stay up. I think that's gonna work for us. Had to do a little bit of work off camera just because the retainer was really stuck on the spring. So here is valve spring assembly. Looks like there's actually a dampener on the inside. But yeah, this darn two-piece retainer. What a pain in the ass, Ford. Why can't these just be one piece? What the heck? This piece right here goes in the middle like that, was stuck up at the tip of the valve so it wouldn't fall down far enough for the keepers to come loose. So that right there is your valve spring, two-piece assembly, and keepers right here. Now let's get a look at this damn valve seal. Okay, so I correct myself. This is actually the exhaust valve seal because it's right in front of the exhaust port. But if you take a look at these two right here, you might be able to tell this guy is really worn out. These are just umbrella seals. So if this seal right here doesn't fit tightly over that stem, she's gonna leak. Now again, this is on the exhaust side, so it's not as important, but the new seals are also much more pliable than the old ones. I mean, these still have some give to them, but when it comes to this orifice up here by the hole, this thing is rock hard. Not to mention, it's all egged out. So I'm thinking valve seals might be the right choice. All right, so right in there, there's the new valve seal. Put right over the valve. So just put the spring and keepers back on, and then we'll do the intake side. So this is the valve seal on the number five cylinder. Oh, there it is. This valve seal actually has a chunk missing out of it right there. Not to mention the hole is all egged out. Just like that, it's like 4 damn days later, maybe more, and finally, all of the valve seals are done. Holy crap, is this such a pain in the ass? Oh man, any of you old Ford guys, I don't know how you guys deal with this crap. So excuse all of the mess and everything, but if you have ever done valve seals with the heads on an FE, my goodness, is this a pain. Right here, you look at the retainer, and the retainer is actually two pieces. There's this larger outer washer piece and then the center cup, and then the keepers go inside that center cup. So considering that this engine sat forever with no valve covers on it, the keepers rusted to the center cup, but the center cup comes free of the washer. So when you depress the valve, or sorry, when you depress the spring, the center cup and the keepers stay stuck to the top of the valve because the keepers are rusted to it. And my goodness, is it a fight to get those to break free. And then of course, when they break free, they go ping, never to be found again. You have to take an hour finding the keepers and that inner cup. It all falls in and amongst, you know, the power steering and all that stuff in here. My goodness, what a pain in the butt. My homemade tool, combination of that thing up there from Amazon and this piece of pipe here, actually worked pretty good. Over on the passenger side, it was really fast. On the driver's side, because you got the brake booster to deal with, my gosh, wow, what a pain. Here's to hoping that's actually the problem. We could do all of this. We could have, and on video, this will be like a minute or two as it's clipping through, but this took like 5 days. And at points it took 4 hands, me and Steve 2.0, to try to get these damn valve spring retainers to come free. All of this to find out if the valve seals are in fact the problem. I think they are. However, we could still have an intake gasket leak. Now that the valve springs are done, I'm going to spend another day scraping all the gasket off of the valve covers, putting this all back together, and we'll fire it up and see if it smokes. All right, it's been a few days. Finally ready to put the valve train back in this thing. All the valve seals are done, the gasket surfaces has been scraped, and the valve covers have been cleaned and somewhat straightened, so hopefully they'll be flat when they go back on. All the push rods are back in, as well as this oil deflector that mounts right under the rocker stand. So ready for the rockers. Okay, here we are looking a little bit more complete. Valve train is in, valve covers are on. Let's see, rocker arm shafts on these FEs, Google says 40 to 45 foot-pounds. I went 45 foot-pounds on both sides. One other thing that I'm going to change, and this is the first and only change on the carburetor so far, is I'm going to replace this 4.5 power valve with an 8.5. Reason for that, what I'm hoping it's going to do is it's going to get us a little bit of power valve fuel enrichment a little earlier so that when the turbo starts to spool, we won't have a lean spot when we're transitioning. We're going to find out one thing at a time. All right, pretty carburetor going on again. Ta-da! Everything's done. All right, it's been a little while. Pretty much for the most part, everything's reassembled here. I did top off the oil a little bit just because it was leaking and burning so much before. I just put a couple quarts of some fresh in there. Finally, time to fire it up. We're gonna crank it for a bit, fill the bowls, and fire it off. Okay, I definitely forgot to film this the first time. I'm sorry. Pardon the belt squeal. I think I just need to mess with idle a little more. Okay, the truck has been running for a few minutes now. It's definitely warm. I do not see any smoke. If this thing was sitting here idling this long in the past, you would see smoke out of that tailpipe for sure. So it runs, it starts and runs. Got some massive belt squeal up front. But man, look at this. I just put those valve cover gaskets on. I didn't goop anything. And look at that whole spark plug well right there. It's full of oil. And similar situation up here. Holy crap, these things leak like crazy. I'm gonna let this thing cool off. Yeah, pull those valve cover gaskets off and goop everything back up to try to keep the oil in the head. But it does run. I'm wondering if that oil that got into those two spark plugs is kind of making this thing run like a turd. I don't know. More tomorrow. All right, how about a little redemption, huh? It does still run, and it doesn't even smoke, other than like being rich or being lean, whatever. So I have to solve those oil leaks because that's pretty bad, and I think that has led to a misfire or fouled out plugs, so I gotta pull the plugs and check them. Otherwise, this thing is running, and we are finally getting back to actually tuning up on it. As I mentioned, geez, do these valve covers leak. Wow, I don't know how you Ford guys deal with this shit. It's incredible. So those will come off. I have to redo them. Back out here, it's the next day, and I have decided to go the full goop method, which is the way these valve covers were on the first time. They leaked horribly yesterday, all over the place. So today I'm gonna do a layer of silicone on the valve cover and on the head, sandwich the gasket in between, and just pray that everything seals. Something else I found, and I apologize for fixing this off camera, is we actually had a push rod right there. This guy right here, it actually popped out and was bent. And I'm not sure if that's because those push rods fell out of the rocker arms or something when I was torquing this down and I just didn't see it. But I did take that push rod out and hammer it back straight. It looks good enough for me. I retorqued the rocker arms on this side as well as the driver's side just to make sure that everything was good. Looked to make sure all the push rods were in the lifters. Hopefully we don't have that problem again. Okay, I think I'm finally starting to experience the curse that is this truck that maybe Angus was talking about. Last night when I was putting the valve cover on, I was cranking it down and I heard a crack and the bolt kind of went loose. So I thought that the threads were stripped, so I left it right where it was. But it turns out, right back here, it broke off the corner of the intake manifold right there. Now that is a blind hole, and I don't think that it actually gets anywhere near the port. However, that is now something I'm gonna have to deal with. This is a cast iron intake, I can't weld that. So it might be a JB weld and pray kind of thing. All right. A little bit of JB weld, and we'll let that set up. Then I will clean it out with a tap and we'll smother it with a ton of silicone, and hopefully it's fine. Okay, it's been a little bit. Valve covers are back on. There's an egregious amount of silicone involved. I don't know if I'm proud of it or not, but if it doesn't leak, then it's fine. While this is setting up, because that side I had to do later because of the broken bolt hole in the back, I'm gonna let the silicone set up just a little bit more. One other thing I wanted to take care of is our wastegate down there. Now, I did not know what weight spring was in that wastegate. I have since found out that there are 2 6s in there, so a 12-pound opening pressure Holy crap. It came with a bunch of other springs, so I'm gonna roll through what those are and we're gonna swap this out for something a little safer. So if you order a wastegate from VS Racing like I did, it's gonna come with a bunch of different springs to let you kind of dial in what cracking pressure you want on your wastegate. The red is 4 PSI, the green is 6 PSI, and the yellow is 7 PSI. And then inside the wastegate are 2 natural colored springs that are 6 pounds each. So we're gonna take the wastegate apart and we're gonna swap in this guy right here. We want 6 pounds, that way we crack open at 6 pounds, and if we want to, we can pull them a boost line and get a little bit more or a little bit less. Little pro tip for any of you guys that might be doing this for the first time: if you're taking a wastegate like this apart, where the whole cap bolts on, put it in a vise. That way you can compress the spring, and when you take out these tiny little screws, it doesn't go ping and shooting all over the place. Just a tech tip. Now that all the bolts are out, slowly open the vise. Try not to have this thing go flying everywhere. All right, there you go. Disassembled wastegate. If you've ever seen, if anybody's curious, right, this is just an aluminum hat. There are 2 natural colored springs equaling 12 PSI, too much for this truck. And in the middle, this is like a machined aluminum spring receiver, and then this is a high temp heat resistant diaphragm. As boost pressure comes in the bottom, the boost pressure, the back pressure of the exhaust slowly works against the springs in the hat to open up this valve and to allow air to pass from the bottom of the valve through to the outlet of the valve right there. That's all it is. It's very simple. Spring-loaded valve. Okay, one more tech tip. Wastegates, right? You can't just install the wastegate just like this. There's one piece missing. That's this piece right here. This is called the fire ring. This is essentially the valve seat that this plunger valve right here seats up against when you're not in boost. This has to be installed, otherwise you will have a giant exhaust leak right around this valve going straight out the outlet. Ask me how I know. I've done it before, and when your turbo LS car makes like 350 wheel horsepower, it's because you forgot your fire ring and you're not making any boost. So remember that. All right, before it gets too late, I want to try to run this one more time. The RTV on the valve covers has had a chance to set up. Everything's nice and snug. Plugs are back in, wires are on, everything like that. Hopefully, now that that push rod has been straightened and put back in, we'll have firing on all 8 cylinders. So here we go. Look at that. Oh man, running good. Sounding good. It's not smoking yet. Check for leaks. Don't see any leaks yet. Okay, now that it's running at least somewhat decent, seems to be idling good, hitting on all 8, I'm gonna take it for a gentle drive around the block just to see that everything else is working. We're gonna watch for smoke. I know it's dark, but I'm gonna keep an eye out. All right, so just driving very gently and gingerly around the block here. Huge improvement has been made to the transfer slots. They were too far closed before. So now, we're right off idle. For idling, as soon as we give it just a little bit of fuel, a little bit of throttle, seems to be working pretty well. It's the next morning. We did notice this thing actually started to smoke again last night. So I pulled it in the garage, I pulled out the number 5 plug, and guess what? Soaked in oil. So it wasn't the valve seals that are the problem. It's more than likely the intake manifold gasket. The funny thing that I've noticed about this truck ever since it started smoking was that it doesn't smoke right away. You might get a puff at startup, but then the thing will sit here and it'll idle and it'll drive around clean for 5 to 10 minutes. And only after you've been, I swear that air compressor knows as soon as I start recording. It's happened to me like 5 times throughout this video. For that rude interruption, I've noticed that this truck never smokes immediately after startup. You might get a puff right when it starts, and then it'll sit here and it'll idle, and you can even drive it around for 5 to 10 minutes or so before you notice anything. It runs totally clean, but only after the engine's been running for a while and it's moving a bunch of oil around does the smoking actually start. A couple of you are concerned with the fact that maybe I don't have a restrictor in the line for this turbo. In fact, I do. The feed fitting for the turbo actually has a restrictor built in. I think the orifice is like 60 thousandths of an inch going into the turbo. The oil feed to the turbo is restricted. Secondly, I checked the outlet of the compressor going to the intake manifold, looking for signs of oil leaking past the turbo seals. It's completely dry. Essentially, we have liquid oil getting into the number 5 cylinder. I said all that to say, through searching the forums and stuff, I found out that these FE engines have a tendency to over oil the top end. There is one way to fix this. I mean, there's a couple methods of doing it, but essentially there is a possible fix by putting a restrictor in the oil hole for the rocker shafts. That way it'll slow down how much oil is being pumped up to the head, and it won't overflow the head and essentially submerge the intake valves in oil. I think this is one thing I'm gonna try before I pull the intake manifold off, just because I can do this a lot faster than that. As a last ditch effort, I'm gonna try putting restrictors in, and we're gonna see if that makes a difference. Okay, it's been just a little bit. I wanted to show this. I saw this on a forum. So the rocker shafts on an FE, they oil through an oiling hole right here in the second to last bolt that holds down the rocker shaft. So you can see right in there, a Holley carburetor jet fits perfectly in that orifice, and it will restrict it down. And so I think I chose 69 jets. I'm gonna see if this works. I've heard that this can help with these things smoking, and it's very easy to get that in there as opposed to tearing the whole intake and everything off. So I'm gonna throw the rocker shafts back in on both sides, put the valve covers back on, and run it for a while to see if it still smokes. If it does, then it's intake time. As I said before, other than when it initially fires up, now it's starting up and idling just fine. I don't see a lot of smoke, not even close to what it was last night. So I'm gonna let it idle a little longer, see if it cleans up. Idling for a little while now. We do have some smoke, a little bit. Not even close to what it was last night. Probably not going to be able to get an accurate representation until we take it for a drive. A few more minutes now. You can see it's still smoking pretty good. But we also are in deep vacuum right now. Making like, I don't know, 18 inches of vacuum maybe. Which is typically when this thing smokes the worst. Yeah, about 18 inches of vacuum right now. So it's making a ton of vacuum, probably pulling that oil from somewhere. I'm gonna throw a little fuel in, we'll take it for a drive. All right, so here we are after just a little drive, and it's still burning some oil, but I thought it would be clouding us out by now. So I think those valve seals did something. But if you rev it up, it puffs a cloud of smoke. Okay, well, we'll check that number 5 plug again, see if we still got a bunch of oil on it. Take a look at this right here. Okay, so obviously this plug is oily a little bit, but that is significantly better than the last time that it came out. We have definitely reduced the amount of oil that is getting into that cylinder. I am gonna shove my inspection camera down in there to see if we still have a puddle, but I'm wondering if the oil restrictors are actually doing something here. So I'm gonna check that out. All right, this piece of crap is starting to remind me why I don't work on Fords. This thing is so up and down. I had it out, we were driving it around, it was awesome. Actually boosting, making 5 pounds, perfectly drivable, only puffing oil when you pulled away from a stop sign. Let it idle for a few minutes in my friend's driveway up the street, backed it out to come home, and it started doing what it did before. Wouldn't run unless it was all the way to the floor. Front float bowl is out of fuel. I'm thinking the carb's too hot, whatever. We'll let it cool off and finally get into the intake gasket. Okay, here it is. Same problem as before. Took the fuel line off the inlet there and absolutely no fuel. That jives with the fact that there's nothing in the front bowl. I think it's just because of the routing of the fuel line maybe. I know these things boil fuel sometimes and they vapor lock really bad. Probably have to reroute this, get it away from the engine a little more. But we still have to take the intake off. I wondered why this thing was suddenly leaking oil worse than it ever has on this side. And here it is. These are the cheapy rubber gaskets that just got absolutely destroyed the last time I put them on. Must have over tightened them, my bad. So another new set of gaskets, fantastic. Rockers are off, push rods are pulled out. Time to pull the distributor. Oh, wow. Oh boy. That's funny. Okay, well, the distributor came out pretty easily. Holy shit. In an attempt to try to minimize the amount of coolant I spray everywhere, I'm gonna go after this fitting right here. That's the heater hose outlet of the water pump. My hope is that maybe the geyser will be less right there and I can direct it down to the bucket underneath here. All right, I'd say I caught 90% of that. Anyway, go after the water neck here. See if I can find a good way to get in there. There it goes. Make sure all the water's out of that hose there. Looks like there's another little itty bitty connection down here behind all these hoses. Probably see that short little length of hose right there, so I got to undo that too. Okay, with that I think we can start taking all of the manifold bolts loose. I don't think there's anything else that's going to be tying us to the vehicle. Time to give this thing a try. Due to that right there, probably. Ford guys, help! Just kidding. There, that should work. It's already loose. I know these intake manifolds weigh an absolute ton. Holy cow. Yeah, this might be. Let's just sit right on the battery. Yep, don't mind me. Oh, my hip is cramping. My hip. I might need to phone a friend for this. Oh, yeah. Nothing to grab onto. Holy shit, these things are so heavy. Oh, wow. Let's have a look. Okay. I think I may have finally found the problem. Maybe. This is a pretty good guess to a smoking gun here. It's probably hard to see in there, but you can actually see that there's a puddle of oil on the back side of the intake valve. So in fact, this gasket is bad. Upon further inspection, I was looking around this port right here, because this is the bad intake port. So looking at the gasket, if you look right here, there is a mark where it is discolored or whatever, right? I wonder if that is where it was pulling oil, because if you look at the top of the gasket, it's all dry up here. but at the bottom there is this one discolored spot, and it lines up perfectly with this little itty bitty deformity in the head. That would be the likely culprit, at least I think so. If you look there, you can see there is the embossing of that imperfection in the cylinder head, which I believe was a direct passage underneath the gasket for oil to be sucked in. This is my best guess as to what the problem is. It seems to make sense because only cylinder number 5 was really having trouble. All the rest of them looked fine. Okay, now we get to do all the fun stuff of putting these all back in. I think that is the smoking gun. At least I hope so. So anyway, I think I'll run to the store and grab a tube of RTV and plan on just putting a skim coat of RTV around all these intake ports because there's some imperfections in the cylinder head. All right, it's been a minute. New gaskets installed with just a little bit of silicone sealer all over everything. This is my last ditch attempt to get this thing to seal. I'm hoping I don't regret this in 5 minutes. I'd have to scrape all of this back off, but Eric from S Motorsports is here to help me lift this massive intake, which weighs like 100 pounds. So we're gonna flop that sucker on there and throw some bolts in it and maybe call it a day. Good evening, everybody. It's been a few days and a whole lot of work has happened off camera. A lot of it was reassembly that you guys have seen a few times. Valve covers and drivetrain are back in. The new intake manifold gasket is in. Everything's been torqued. We let the silicone set up. I've been fixing a lot of things on the way, and one of the things that's been on the top of my list is fixing these heater core lines. I'm gonna bypass or kind of delete the heater core for now. I'm just gonna run a hose from the fitting here to the other fitting right behind that bar right there. So I'm just gonna loop it just for now to get rid of it so I can get rid of all of those lines and stuff and get them out of my way. Finally, get these damn things out of here for now. So one other thing I'm going to do with the carburetor off is I'm going to change the jetting just a little bit. So the primary jet is a 71 and the secondary jet is a 78. What I noticed when I was driving around is the lower power valve actually helps quite a bit for that like lower to partial like mid throttle area, but I felt like until the secondaries opened, there were some times where we were running just a little bit leaner than I wanted to, up near 100 kPa, which to me indicates that the main jet is still a little bit too small. But then if you whack the throttle and went wide open, the secondary jet is large enough to where this thing would run like 10.5 to 1. So it's still a little bit rich at wide open throttle under boost. So what I want to do is for the primary jet, I want to go up. I think I'm just going to go up to a 72, and for the secondary jet, I'm actually going to come down to a 77. Very slight change, and we'll see how it drives. Okay, our freshly rejetted carburetor is ready to go back on. Get that bolted down, clean up a few other loose ends, put the distributor cap and wires on, and then I think I'm gonna adjust the tensioner on this freaking belt here that squeals like crazy. Then we're gonna start it up. All right, it's been just a minute. We got water in the radiator, bypass the heater hose, that's all checked and ready to go. Finally, we are ready to fire this thing up and see if it continues to smoke. Problem. Hold on. So I had rerouted the fuel line to get it away from the engine, hopefully prevent some of that vapor lock issue. I installed a check valve and it was the wrong way. Okay, third or fourth try now with the linkage right for the throttle. Alright, it was running like crap because I forgot to hook up the line to the brake booster. Whoopsie daisy. Would you look at that? Alright, so I do want to run the truck for a while, get the cooling system bled out because we did pull the intake manifold and reroute heater hoses. So normally this thing would start to smoke after a few minutes of running. So we're going to let it run, let the oil move around, and see if we get any more bad smoke. All right, it's been a few minutes. We're bubbling the cooling system, and you can tell coolant is moving in there. It's circulating through the radiator, so it's going through the block. And we've been sitting here idling now for, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes and still no smoke. Okay, just took this thing for a rip around the block, and look at this. It is still not smoking. How's about that for a little bit of redemption? It was the intake manifold gasket the whole time. It's the next day after work, which means it's gonna get dark soon because in Wisconsin here we have light till maybe 6 p.m. And as excited as you are, I really want to take this thing back out and retest 0 to 60 and a whole bunch of other stuff, but it's super dangerous to do that in the dark around here, especially considering all the deer. So I've got a few other fixes I'm going to do tonight, and then we're going to test tomorrow. One key piece came in today. This is a manual boost controller. You guys have seen me install these before. All this is a variable bleed valve, which is going to take a signal from the compressor outlet, and it's basically going to go in line to the wastegate down there. And depending on what way you turn this knob, it's going to bleed off more or less pressure, therefore putting more or less pressure on your wastegate, and ultimately putting more or less boost into the engine. I'm going to find a place to install this, and then we should be able to dial our boost into exactly 7 pounds. The old super secret self-tapper trick. Okay, there is our manual boost controller. Now, you see here that the lines kind of run in between the manifold and the downpipe. They're kind of just suspended in free air there. I do have them zip tied to some other lines up here. I don't know if I love this setup or not, but it's clean enough. You have access to the boost controller right there, and I reserve the right to change it if I don't like it. I had to rewire the signal wire for the coolant temp sensor because the wire literally broke off in a couple spots. It was super brittle. So got that reconnected, fixed a little water leak on the heater hose bypass. So I'm going to throw this thing up in the air and we're doing exhaust. Okay, it's been a little bit. Got in here and cut the downpipe apart from the rest of the exhaust and welded a 3-inch V-band all the way around. So now the rest of the exhaust is detachable. This seam has been welded, and I added just a little bit back here just so that I could get clear of the cab corner so that I can put the muffler back here in this big wide open space. And then we're still going to kick it out 45 degrees to get past the bedside over there. So now it's like my favorite part of every single build. I actually have a couple different mufflers to pick from. I have the 3-inch bullet style muffler that I put on this thing temporarily just to quiet it down for the neighbors. But I also have another one. I have a Gibson MWA, which is a single baffle oval style. That's this guy right here. This is an MWA. This is made in America, all stainless steel, robot welded, really nice stuff. It's the same mufflers I have on my Oldsmobile. So why not? We're gonna try a comparison between just straight pipe, the 3-inch turbo or 3-inch bullet muffler, and then the MWA, see which one we like best. I think I'm gonna like this one, but we'll see. Okay, exhaust option number 1 is straight pipe, 3-inch off the turbo. Okay, so that was 3-inch exhaust right off of the turbo. Love that sound. We're gonna try the 3-inch like bullet style muffler. This is also like a single baffle muffler. I don't know, I had this on the Datsun for a while and it was okay, but this can just slip onto the end of the pipe, so we'll try this really fast. 3-inch bullet style muffler. All right, I'm saving the Gibson for last because I had to cut off the 2 1/4 inch sections. This was neck down to 2 1/4. I had to get rid of that, and believe it or not, all these mufflers are 3-inch. Look at that, woohoo! Yeah, there's just one single baffle in there. You might be able to see it. These sound really good. They peel off a lot of exhaust gas at idle, but then wide open throttle, they flow almost the same as an open pipe. Okay, finally, Gibson MWA. Okay, let me know what you think. I'm gonna go back and review the video footage and pick my favorite. After listening to all 3 exhaust clips on the camera microphone, I think I'm gonna stick with the Gibson. I kind of figured I would anyway. I bought it for this truck, but they do sound really good with the turbo and they flow plenty. So it does quiet it down a little bit at idle and cruise. All right, here it is in all of its glory. There's the 3-inch downpipe, all the way straight back. Here's our muffler, tucks up right under the box, and then kicks out at a 45, just past the bedside right there, right in front of the tire. So you can see the muffler hanging down a little bit in the middle, but otherwise I think we still have really good ground clearance. I think it'll sound pretty good. One of the other things I've been meaning to do for a while is get rid of these old exhaust pipes. We don't need 3 exhaust tips on this truck, right? We need to reduce the weight so that we can make as much horsepower, and our power to weight ratio, we need that to be as high as possible so that we can make our 0 to 60 time. Here we go. What a sweet system. Look at that, all one piece. From the head pipe all the way back to the tailpipe. Holy crap. Look at this. This must have been a real budget job. Yeah, you could do it cheaper. These are probably like pipes off of a Harley or something. That's kind of what they look like. Cut those off of your hog and weld them onto your truck. Okay, it is finally time to retest 0 to 60 on the Fundred. I did make a few jet changes. The thing is running about 11.5 to 11.2 to 1 in boost, which is perfect. It may be a little on the fat side, but that's fine for this truck. So I apologize for the wind noise. This thing has some pretty shot window seals. We are on our way to our undisclosed location. We're gonna do 3 runs just like we did last time. And we'll monitor it and we'll show you via the same app that we used. We'll show you what we get. Alright. So you can see our app's reset. We're all back to 0. We're in drive just like we were before. We're at about 5 pounds of boost. Here we go. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo! Nice! 8.1! Hell yeah! Woo! Holy cow! Oh, that feels good! Wow, man, this thing felt awesome! Like I said, that was like 5 pounds of boost. Ooh, okay. 8.1, first run. We shaved 1.5 seconds off of this thing. We're gonna spin back around and head back to the track. Okay, test number 2. Here we go. Oh! 7.9! Hell yeah, man! Holy shit! Oh man, obviously you guys aren't riding along, but this truck is totally different. Oh, it's so responsive. It just picks up and moves. Just a little bit of boost, my God, it makes such a difference.
Okay, so 8.1 and 7.9. We're gonna do one more. Try one more, looking at the temperature. Temperature's holding fine, maxing out about 5 pounds of boost. This thing is running perfectly. See if we can hit that under 8-second number. Here we go. Yeah. 8-0. All right. Woo! Holy crap. Literally a second and a half off of the 0 to 60. But honestly, what's more impressive than that is just simply the improvement in drivability. I can't believe it. This truck ran just fine all the way home from Iowa, but now with the turbo, this thing gets up to where it's making actual horsepower so much sooner. I mean, it just, oh my goodness, it's quiet with the muffler, the turbo spools really fast. It's freaking awesome. I can't explain how cool this setup is. And I did this all with a mechanical pump that's boosted. That's a boost reference. It's incredible. It's so simple, but it works. And I had to make a few jet changes to solve a couple other problems, but you could do this to any carbureted car out there with very, very basic stuff. It's really freaking cool. Okay, well, time for the last test. We need to see if this thing does a better burnout than it did before. Okay, here we go. See if this thing will do a better burnout with a little more horsepower. Holy crap, I can't believe it. We shaved a second and a half off of a 9.5 second 0 to 60 truck. Now that might not sound like a lot, but that's a big difference when we're talking 0 to 60, man. This thing actually gets up and kind of moves. It's pretty impressive. All of you out there who have waited patiently for this video, thank you so much. I hit a whole bunch of snags. I got sick, as you can probably hear. It's been kind of a struggle to get the truck to this point right now, but man, oh man, is it running fantastically, and everything is nice and happy. The progression ignition distributor is working super well. I'm having a ton of fun with this truck. I feel like every freaking old farm truck should be turbo just like this one, because my God, does it make it so much more fun. We are on to the next portion of the build with this truck. I have a whole lot of plans for it. All of you out there liking, commenting, all of my new subscribers from Junkyard Digs and everywhere else, thank you so much. I'm having a ton of fun, and I will see you in the next one.